योग पथ अति जटिल अति कठिन अति गहन, पर जाना तो है हमको अंत तक, जगी है दिल में दृढ़ लगन, दृढ़ लगन, दृढ़ लगन। योग पथ अति जटिल अति कठिन अति गहन, पर जाना तो है हमको अंत तक, जगी है दिल में दृढ़ लगन, दृढ़ लगन, दृढ़ लगन। चाहे छाए घोर अंधेरा चाहे छाए कितने तूफान, निर्भीक होकर हम चलेंगे, निर्भीक होकर हम चलेंगे, जननी ले चले जहाँ हम चलेंगे। धैर्य है संकल्प है, धैर्य है संकल्प है, धैर्य है संकल्प है, जननी बिना ना विकल्प है, जननी बिना ना विकल्प है। हम दिव्य तेज से जुड़ेंगे, तेज से जुड़ेंगे, क्योंकि अपनी शक्ति अल्प है। हम दिव्य तेज से जुड़ेंगे, तेज से जुड़ेंगे, क्योंकि अपनी शक्ति अल्प है। योग पथ अति जटिल अति गहन अति, पर जाना तो है हमको अंत तक, जगी है दिल में दृढ़ लगन, 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 दृढ़ लगन।
Namaste everyone. Welcome to yet another Friday Yes Talk. Today I have the privilege of introducing my very dear friend Divyanshi. She will be talking on the topic beauty, food for the soul, and how she likes to put it, beauty is a bridge between inner and outer. So Divyanshi is based in Auroville. She is the co-founder of Poonam Center for Integrality, which is working in the field of higher education, and they run programs based in the integral yoga psychology. And essentially Divyanshi is looking for the application of integral knowledge in everyday life. If you talk about theories to her, she will tell you how it needs to be done, tell me that. So she is more of a go-getter in that sense, and how in small details things can be brought in, integral knowledge can be brought in. And that is what she'll be sharing with you today. Beauty, which is such an important aspect of the manifestation of this beautiful world. So over to you, Divyanshi, and looking forward to your sharing. Welcome once again.
Thank you, Aditi. It'll be really good to have the cameras on. It'll be good for us to see each other. Even as we are meeting online, it'll be good to make a bit of an eye contact. It really makes a difference. So if you can, please do have your cameras on, so it becomes a bit of an interaction. That's so beautiful. So good to see you join with children as well. Okay, so first of all, I must congratulate you for coming on a session on beauty. Beauty is such an integral part of yoga, and yet, you know, in my perspective, it is rather, in the traditional yoga and the traditional spirituality, rather ignored. And it's like, yes, work is an important aspect of life. Yes, studies, knowledge is an important aspect of life. And of course, one must love the mother, one must love the divine. But beauty, that is sort of looked at as, acha, ye sab to ornamental hai. All of this is ornamental. This is only superficial. Right? And we don't tend to associate so much of beauty with spirituality, whereas it can be a very, very concrete, real doorway doorway to the divine, and it is my utmost privilege to be sitting out of Audible, which is in many ways an attempt in the direction of bringing beauty into the physical, and to be hosting the session from here. So really congratulating each one of you that you really took on to this topic and are going to be spending the next 1.5 hours dedicatedly in the pursuit of beauty, which is something I find is very extraordinary. And I must begin with just congratulating you for acknowledging that importance of beauty. So before I begin, I just wanted to know from you over chat. You can all put over chat a bit of your responses in terms of, what has made you attend today's session? Why beauty? And what is your living question related to beauty? So there are questions which are really mental questions. They're questions that we ask in order for us to be the best student in the class, for us to get, out of a sense of mental curiosity. But then there are questions which are real questions. It's a living question that really kind of stays with us. It's a question that is burning inside of us. It's a seeking. So really take about 30 seconds to ask yourself, what is the burning, what is the real, what is the living question that I have in my heart when it comes to beauty? So I just like to, I'm not promising I'm going to be answering all the questions, but it's sometimes just good to articulate some of these questions, more than for anybody else, but for ourselves, that, what is it that I'm seeking? What is it that I'm seeking, to get a very focused clarity on that? So we'll take about 30 seconds for you to really concentrate and tell me, what is your living question about beauty? Would really like to see all 29 of us putting a question on chat, and 30 seconds for putting your living questions over chat. Very beautiful question from Navneet ji. Thank you. We can also read other questions once we are done contemplating our question. How to identify true beauty and what is its significance? I've read about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Keen to know, what is beauty yoga? Inner beauty reflects the outer. Does inner beauty reflect the outer, and vice versa? Body expresses through beauty. So question is, am I clued into my body? Does that make me more attached to my body? Is that the question, Prakash? You can also just unmute and respond, Prakash. How to express beauty at all levels in everyday life.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Divyanshi?
Yes, go ahead.
No, my question was like, like mind expresses through knowledge, and vital is expressed through, emotions. So like that, body is expressed through beauty. So am I recognizing that, like I feel my body is dead, like I can recognize my mind and my vital, but my body is dead to me. So that is really my question.
Okay, that is quite a...
Ma'am, why are we, ma'am? I didn't understand that. What are we discussing?
So Kashvi, we are all putting a living question that we have with regard to beauty over chat. And Prakash has put this very beautiful question where he's asking that I can recognize my mind very well, but my connection with my body is not so strong. So that is what he was sharing.
So ma'am, even can we also read someone's mind?
That is another topic, Kashvi. We will have to stay on topic. Whether you can read somebody's mind or not is for another day. Today, let us focus on the topic of beauty, because that is why we've all gathered here. So the other question that we have on chat is how the manifestation of beauty in our life can make our life beautiful. Okay, so I think I'm going to begin with the set of questions that we have over chat. Okay, one last one that has come. What should I do to ensure that every attempt art is done through connecting with the divine? Very, very beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to begin with perhaps where Navneet started from. We've read about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Keen to know what is Beauty Yoga. It reminds me of this very beautiful quotation by the mother where she says that the divine manifests in the psychic as love, in the mind as knowledge, in the vital as power, and in the physical as beauty. And that's the one part, which has not been, in the traditional part, not been so much acknowledged. I'll actually read out the full quotation of the mother so you get a bit of the context about the very importance of beauty. Herein she says, it is one of the greatest weapons of the Asura. It is one of the greatest weapons of the Asura at work when you're taught to shun beauty. It has been the ruin of India. The divine manifests in the psychic as love, in the mind as knowledge, in the vital as power, in the physical as beauty. If you discard beauty, it means you're depriving the divine of this manifestation in the material, and you hand over that part to the Asura. Now that's a very, very strong quotation. It's a very, very strong quotation, and that just begins with putting just so much of importance to the path of beauty. So, like you see in the vegetal kingdom, you have fruits and vegetables which have been, put together by nature for the body, for the nourishment of our body. But we also have flowers which is meant for the nourishment of our soul in nature. So beauty is literally the food for the soul. You must have experienced yourself when you go to any place which is pure and pristine nature. You experience in a very quiet, subtle, natural, organic way, a certain harmonization begins to take place inside of you. Any place which is pure, pristine beauty, you go to the mountains, the very untouched mountains. There are hardly few remaining now that, we've become tourists, but these very, very pristine natural places, nature places, it very naturally, organically, without you even putting an effort at meditation, it brings in a vibration of quietude, calm, and an inner harmonization. So beauty is literally the food for the soul. And also the importance of beauty yoga, as Navneet has put it, also comes from this perspective that when the force is manifesting, when the divine force is coming down, ultimately it has to come down in the very body, in the very matter, in the very body, in the very pulse and the cell of matter and the body. The divine spark, that which is formless, that which is eternal, has to be reflected in the most obscure corners of that which has a form. So that marriage is actually the spectrum on which the process of yoga is happening. The marriage between the formless divine and the form, the divine and form. And in many ways, beauty is, like Mother says, is the footprints of the divine. It's an indication that Krishna has walked this path. It's an indication that the divine has walked this path. And in that sense, in the sense of transforming the very cells of the body, beauty is also in that sense very much connected to the ultimate aim of the path of yoga. It's very, very central to yoga. And, I'm reminded of one of my experiences that I had. It was as a part of a very traditional meditation retreat. And I remember one of the volunteers telling me, don't look at a flower. It will take you away from meditation. and it really, made me take a step back, because here in integral yoga, we celebrate flowers as psychic in the vegetal kingdom, as soul in the vegetal kingdom. And somebody telling me, don't look at the flower, it will take you away from meditation. It really struck with me. And that is where I see, Mother talking about that it is one of the greatest weapons of the Asura at work. When you're taught to shun beauty, it has been the ruin of India. Then I understand that, why has Mother used such a strict language so as to speak. And if you look at, the Mother, she also gave a lot of importance to the care of matter, to the care of material. She would have things preserved, which is, preserved for years altogether, be it a handkerchief or an old paper, because she would really care for matter. Now, why is it important to care for matter? And does that make one materialist? So one of the greatest misunderstanding that has happened in the Indian context is, caring for matter is seen as equivalent to being materialistic. Now, there is a difference between caring for matter and being materialistic. So materialism, in the way that we understand this today, it has become a lot to do with consumerism, having a lot of stuff. Actually, we are not even true materialists. We stand sometimes on a moral high ground that, we are all spiritual people. All this is more Maya. Materialism is not important. But at the same time, the ones who so as to claim to be on the path of materialism, they're also not true materialists. Because if one were truly a materialist, one would care for matter. So each and every kan, like we say, in Hindi, kan, each and every spark in the manifest world has divine inside of it. So even each and every material thing, each and every stone has behind it the divine essence. And when I say that, I care for the divine, I'm surrendered to the divine, I am on the path of yoga, how can we not take care of things? How can we not take care of the material things that we have? And we don't need to go very far away. Even in our drawers, a lot of people, I wouldn't say most of the people, a lot of people that I've seen, they fill up their drawers as if, the things in the drawers are not living beings, as if there is no divine in matter, as if that pen or that pencil does not need a certain space to breathe, as if it's not the sleeping place or the home of that pen or that pencil. So just the kind of material care that Mother gave to things is also an indication of just the importance of matter, the union of spirit and matter, the fact that behind each material thing is the divine principle, is the divine essence. And that also really, to me, communicates just how central, how important is the path of beauty. Just give me a moment. I have low battery on my system. I'll put it on charge and do that. Yes. Okay. So with that, I guess more or less, we understand why beauty is important. With that, I'd move on to where are we when it comes to beauty? And actually, this topic of beauty took birth in the context of Gnostic Center in Delhi, which is itself an extremely, extremely beautiful place. And I could just be in the Gnostic Center and contrast it with the rest of Gurgaon or the rest of Delhi. And I was constantly, asking myself that, coming out of Auroville, being in the context of the city, constantly asking myself this one thing. I see everybody is nowadays on social media, on Instagram. And on Instagram Reels, if you see, it's full of beauty, full of people wearing, beautiful things, full of people making beautiful crafts, full of people, sharing the beautiful things that they've created. And yet somehow, if everybody is pursuing beauty, even the person who says that, I'm not into beauty, spends about 2 minutes being like, which shirt should I wear? So if everybody is in the pursuit of beauty, then how come as a collective, as a totality, as a society, when I look around, when I see the traffic around, when I see, on both sides of the road, why don't I see beauty? And it was really a question that was beginning to bother me, that why is it, if each individual is somewhere pursuing beauty, then why is it that collectively we are not really pursuing beauty, or that beauty is at least not coming out? And it was really an alive question. And then I started contemplating as to why could it be? And one of the reasons that I could, one of the few reasons that I could think of, or I could contemplate, was one, of course, in Instagram, one has to bring in beauty in a limited area. It's easy to bring in beauty. Beauty is also another definition of beauty, is perfection of form. So perfection in details, it is easy to bring in that perfection when it is a limited thing that one is dealing with. When I'm making a little card, it's easy to bring in beauty, but it's so much more difficult to bring beauty when I'm dealing with the entire city or the entire society, because that aspect of beauty requires me to grow beyond my ego. So the difference somewhere between, the ordinary pursuit of beauty and the spiritual pursuit of beauty is, the spiritual pursuit of beauty begins with an expansion of the self. It is not focused on I, me, myself. It is not about what am I wearing? Am I looking good? It is not, focused around that I, even though you may and you must by all means wear beautiful things, but that is not the center of the pursuit of beauty on the spiritual paths. It's not centered around the ego. So that was another thing that I was saying. And also what I was saying is the chaos that I was seeing, when I say that when I look out of the window of my car and go, now why am I not seeing beauty? And perhaps the chaos that I'm seeing is also a reflection of the chaos that at a deeper level the society is embodying. So it's not, beauty is not just physical in that sense. It is really an inner, inside out manifestation. Only when there is a deeper harmony in the collective on the inside will that deeper harmony manifest as beauty on the outside. So this is another reason that I could think of, that why is it that, even as individually we are in pursuit of beauty, why is it collectively that, we are somewhat not creating beautiful spaces? And at the core of this contemplation, what I really came to was that somewhere pursuit of beauty is also the pursuit of delight. If you notice, each one of us, why do we want to look good, or why do we want to wear beautiful clothes? Because somewhere we are pursuing happiness, we are pursuing a certain pleasure, and it can be a sensorial pleasure, or it is a certain happiness that you get when somebody says, hey, you look good. So there is somewhere a pursuit of happiness behind the pursuit of beauty. So unless that pursuit of happiness is refined, the pursuit of beauty can also not be refined. Would request everyone who's not speaking to keep yourself on mute so that there's the background noise. Okay, coming back, somewhere, if one has to refine this pursuit of beauty, one has to begin with refining that which is behind it. So I could really come up with this thing that beauty is the expression of delight and love in the physical. Delight is the essence of creation, which is why we say Sat Chit Ananda. Delight is the essence of creation. Love is when the essence of delight moves and creates as energy. So love is really when joy or delight dynamizes into as an energy towards creation. And beauty is when that energy consolidates itself into form. So that is the larger framework of creation. Delight as the essence, love as the force or the power, and beauty as the form in which this delightful loving energy consolidates. So if that is the frame that we are operating at, then delight is very, very important, right? But usually our pursuit of delight or our pursuit of happiness is happening at a rather surface level. It is happening at a level of either pure sensorial enjoyment. Let me do something, or let me let me bring in beauty so that it gives me a sensorial pleasure, be it sensorial pleasure through listening to music, or sensorial pleasure through the food I eat, or what I watch, the movies I see. So it's mostly happening at a sensorial level. Then the pursuit of happiness and beauty happens at the level of happiness. So it's our pursuit of happiness. It feels good, when somebody says that I look good. So there is a pursuit of beauty that happens at the level of happiness. But the ultimate thing is the pursuit of the pursuit of beauty by opening oneself to the deeper delight. And the crux there is actually not to pursue it. The thing is, the more you run after money, the money runs away from you. The more you run after happiness, happiness runs away from you. The more you even run after your own progress and spiritual growth, that also runs away from you. But the more you're willing to give yourself, the more you're willing to offer yourself, the more you become attuned with the deeper delight. And the more you are attuned with that deeper delight, the more it begins to flow as beauty. And with that, we move on to the next question, which is how to open to beauty. Several of you in chat have asked, how can I begin to make my life beautiful? How can I begin to open to beauty? And here, to begin with, the answer is very, very simple. We can begin at a very, Aditi mentioned, I'm a very practical person, and I like, to really begin with actual getting your hands dirty and through practices. And as I see that, so I'll not give you very theoretical answers about, how can one begin to open to beauty. For me, the very first step about opening to beauty, as sadhaks, as seekers, as Indians that represent the spiritual guru of the world, as Indians, it is almost our duty. It is almost our duty to pursue this path of beauty first and foremost by bringing cleanliness. Cleanliness is the absolute basic, and I really mean taking cleanliness very, very seriously. We do not take cleanliness seriously. And when I say we do not take cleanliness seriously, it's like, when a guest has to come to our house, we put everything inside the cupboard. Outside it looks all neat and tidy and all clean up, but you open our cupboards and the muck is kind of waiting there. So a true pursuit of cleanliness itself in your own homes and toilets and kitchens, in the nooks and corners, in your utility room, in your washing machine, in the details of your living spaces, to begin to bring cleanliness. Bringing the pursuit of bringing cleanliness itself is a physical, symbolic act. It's almost like a yajna when you do it with the right kind of an attitude to purify on the inside. See, not everybody who's doing brooming is experiencing a deeper delight or transformation. But if you do brooming with the right kind of attitude, the right kind of awareness, with the perspective, may the divine clean me from inside, then the very act of brooming becomes transformative action, a transformative practice. So the first and the foremost important thing is a deep cleanliness of our spaces. A lot of time I also see that I mean, without naming people, but I've seen a lot of people in my surroundings, from my observation of everyday life, beauty is something which is very attractive. So I want to buy, decorative things. I want to beautify things. But what's the point of bringing beauty in life when you're not first and foremost focusing on what needs to get out of my house, the decluttering that needs to be done, because we also live in the context of a highly commercial context, which is, coming also heavily from the Western capitalism, wherein consumerism has kind of become the aim of life, and we've become very, very accumulative of materials. So before, bringing in more beautiful things into the house, beginning with decluttering, it's like the Zen method of spirituality, Zen path, that every day you begin to discard something from your life, and through that you reach higher. So first of all, beginning with discarding things, decluttering, bringing cleanliness, bringing thorough hygiene, bringing orderliness, bringing organization. It almost always surprises me. It really, really touches me very deeply when Mother was writing the 3 key documents for Orwell. She's writing things like Orwell would be the cradle of the Superman. Orwell would be the cradle of the Gnostic being. So she's writing that high a vision for Orwell, and amidst all of that, she mentions 2 things. She says that, bringing a bit of order around yourself helps bring order inside of yourself. And when I read that thing, I felt like this feels literally like a mother telling the child कि तुम कमरा साफ कर लो तो थोड़ा life में order आ जाएगा. Do a little bit of orderliness in your environment, and it'll bring your mind also in order. And I was surprised that, here is Mother putting the charter out for the world for a city which she says is the city of dawn, which is the, the birthing place of the new city, of the new society, of the new consciousness and the new being. And amidst all these very high things, she writes, bring a bit of order around yourself that helps bring a bit of order inside yourself. And it really stayed with me just how important order and organization is to bring in one's environment. Beauty, cleanliness, hygiene, order, orderliness. These are great avenues, particularly if you're used to being in the mind. These are great avenues to begin to connect with the body. Gardening, tending to flowers, doing grooming of the room, decluttering, cleaning, deep cleaning, These are great avenues to connect with the body, like Prakash was talking about, and great avenues of bringing a sense of purification. Oftentimes we think of beauty as a thing of luxury. It requires money for beauty. Beauty is a thing of people who have money. People who don't have money, they don't have time to think about beauty. And actually, beauty does not take money. In fact, if you look at, the traditional villages, even if I look at, say, Tamil Nadu, you have all the village women, they will dress up wearing the real beautiful flowers in their head. They would invest that time to make like a gajra, a garland with the living flowers, and put it in their hair. It's a gesture, it's a cultural gesture of saying that we value beauty. They could have also been like, nowadays you get all kinds of beautiful things, artificial plastic things to put it in the hair, but they don't do it. They acknowledge in that value. And similarly, if you look at the villages, especially the villages in and around Tamil Nadu that I see, they always begin their day by making a kolam outside their houses. And they don't just make a kolam, mechanically it is done. They will first clean up that space. And cleaning up spaces physically, it's a symbolic gesture of cleaning up spaces energetically. And only when you clean up spaces energetically do you clean them up spiritually also. Do you begin to create a spiritually beautiful environment. And many of these ladies, would go outside and make this beautiful kolam. Now these are things that, in cities we're beginning to lose, that, to start one's day by cleaning the veranda and making a little kolam, which is it is not something that takes money. In that sense. No? So in that sense, beauty is not just for the rich, that, all the beautiful art pieces are very, very expensive, and it's for the rich, just bringing a bit of cleanliness, a bit of orderliness, and a bit of consciousness into the spaces where we live, and a beautiful space is created. So it's not necessarily a function of money, so as to speak. I'd give an example of I recently did a tour of a city, so I have a bit of memory of that. So I was watching, on TV, there was this very famous Big Boss show. I don't know if you've heard about this show, but I was seeing like this thing on the television, and I felt like, they are so rich, they must be receiving so much money to produce this show, to do this show, and it must be making a lot of money. It has one of India's leading actors involved as an anchor, so definitely the show makes a lot of money. But when you look at the physical surroundings, it did not have beauty. It did not have that sense of beauty. And then I was wondering that, and that is a great example of how just by having money, that doesn't mean that, the sense of beauty increases, because those guys have all the money in the world, but still couldn't manage to create a genuinely beautiful space. And that brings the next question that Surya has also put on chat, that how do you recognize that true sense of beauty, And one of the simple way of answering this question is, you must always ask yourself, a lot of times people tell you, you are not an artist, so you will not understand art, this is only for the artists and only the intellectual artists can understand. Everyone can understand art, and every sadhak in particular can understand art. And how do you understand art and beauty? By asking yourself this very simple question. This thing that I'm looking at with my physical eyes, which is the space to which this thing is taking me? To give you an example, one may come up with a very beautiful intellectual explanation why this particular painting symbolizes calmness. But when I look at the painting, if I'm not experiencing calmness, then the painting does not symbolize calmness. It is that simple. It reminds me of one of the instructions that the mother had given for Matrimande gardens. One of the seekers asked the mother, so she's given, names to different gardens. And one of the sadhaks asked that, how shall we put the board for the garden of harmony? Should we write a particular quotation that this is the garden of harmony? How should we, where should we write that, the name of the garden? And mother said that, if you're having to tell people that this is the garden of harmony, then you've done a rather bad job at it, because people should come to the garden, experience a sense of harmony, and should tell you, oh my God, what a beautiful place you've created. I experienced such a deep calm, such a deep integration, such a deep sense of harmony. People should tell you this is the garden of harmony. You should not tell people that this is the garden of harmony. And that is the very, very simple indication of, what is art, and how do you indicate that, what is true art in that sense. So coming back to the Big Boss example that I was giving, to me, when I looked at the way they had done the house, it was not leading me in my inner space to a very beautiful, quiet, calm inner space. It felt very noisy and chaotic, and that is where it was leading to. It wasn't leading to an inner sense of harmony, for that matter. So that is one good way of assessing. Another understanding is that different centers of our being express beauty differently and have different needs related to beauty. And it's first of all very important to be aware of the different centers of our consciousness. And one of the examples that I think many of you, particularly those of you who've heard the 60s Hindi music or the 70s Hindi music, you would reckon with me that the 60s Hindi music was somewhat slower. And it was somewhat to do with the higher vital. The man-woman relationship in those movies had to do, it was nothing spiritual for that matter, but it had to do with a emotional bonding. And that is what it had to do. And so the music was also rather slower. Whereas, the movies, the Bollywood, the Hindi movies of today, that is very, very lower vitalish in the integral yoga language, if I were to say, because it has a very, very, first, it's very, very loud. And two, the center of the relationship between the man and the woman is, very clearly sex. And that is how it is shown in the movie. The moment a man and a woman has had sex, matlab established couple, right? Because that is exactly at the heart of a relationship between two people. So the music also, if you see, over the ages is kind of going from the higher vital down towards the lower centers of the being. Now, this is not to say that, generally speaking, the music of the higher vital or of the emotional being would be slightly bit more refined than the music which is purely created for pure sensationalism. While generically it is true, one also has to understand that in each different part of one's being, the music corresponding to that part of being can be refined and can be crude, can be gross, or can be subtle. So for instance, even the music related to the lower vital, which likes a bit more of tempo for that matter, can be extremely beautiful. There's this particular song, Choti Si Asha, Masti Bhare Man Ki, if you heard that particular song, that has a rather, it's not a slow song for that matter, but it has a joyfulness, it has a delight that really represents that refined lower vital movement. So different music represents different parts of being, and the more you're aware of the different parts of being, the more you would be able to sense and see where is this beauty, where is this art taking birth from, and within each part, is it crude or is it subtle? And that you can ask yourself that which is the inner territory that this music is taking me, which is the inner territory which this particular art form is taking me. And that is a central question for you to keep alive within yourself. And ultimately, I think the biggest problem, so as to speak, when one talks about true beauty, is the confusion between the vital and the psychic. That is where the most amount of confusion is, because art is a territory, art is an area where vital loves to express itself, right? And vital is an important part. It's the energy body, it's the energy part, the energy instrument of who we are, but it's an instrument. It is not the leader. Psychic is the leader in the journey. The soul is the leader, and which is why it is important that the vital follows the leader. So then the question comes that, how does one distinguish between the vital sense of beauty and the psychic sense of beauty? One, of course, is one can go beyond, back to the same question: what is it evoking inside of me? And often the art or the beauty which is born out of the vital, it has some of these characteristics. It has the characteristic of desire. It has the characteristic of attachment. It has the characteristic of glorification of ego relationships. And it's like trying to pursue art and pursue beauty for its own sake and not for the sake of something higher. Whereas that which is really, really coming from that deeper aspect pursues beauty for the sake of something higher. And ultimately, with all that we talked about until now, ultimately beauty has to becomes so real, like I said, the example of the Garden of Harmony, that just by being in the presence of that physical form, one is able to experience what that physical form embodies. And then beauty itself becomes the teacher, beauty itself becomes the guru, beauty itself begins to lead the path. Beauty is inherently a harmonizing force. It is inherently something which will bring a sense of peace, quietude, and harmony inside of you. And that is another way to distinguish whether this beauty is coming from a deeper space or not. Because if it is truly coming from a deeper space, it will not lead to chaos. And also, I'm reminded of this other quotation by the mother, wherein she says that I'll probably just read it out exactly as it is. The supramental beauty is something much higher and more perfect. It is a beauty untainted by any ugliness, and it does not need the proximity of ugliness in order to look beautiful. When the supramental forces descend into matter, in order to manifest, the perfect beauty will express itself quite naturally and spontaneously in all forms. This is also very, very important aspect, because we've all heard about this thing that, it requires you to go to very dark places to come up with art. In fact, there has been a certain glorification of madmen and melancholics and people falling into depression to come up with, the most beautiful nazams and poetries and arts and paintings. And this is kind of just dispelling with like one statement that entire myth, because the true beauty does not require contrast to stand out. Usually, even as painters, we are doing this 150 paintings by Sri Aurodindo's 150th anniversary, and we have a group of budding artists, and I'm one of the advisors on the board. And one of the things that you see in the beginning, you are using contrast to create beauty. It's very, very difficult in a painting not to use contrast and create beauty, because it's very easy to create beauty when I put like dark blue, and in that context I bring in white, because of that play of light and darkness. Usually that is how the artists are creating beauty. Now the difficulty is, when you don't have that play of light and darkness, how do you create beauty? Now, one is at the level of the painting, how do you create beauty? But also in the level of your life, how do you create beauty without necessarily, experiencing moments of happiness in contrast to the lows in your life? How can, one get out of that constant flux of ups and downs, happiness and sorrow in life, and bring an experience sacred beauty in life? So yes, with that question, there are a few more questions on chat. I'll take it towards the end. But in terms of practically bringing about beauty, I began with speaking about cleanliness, orderliness, organization, and beginning to recognize, very practically beginning to recognize what is a true sense of beauty and what is really coming from the vital. But other than that, even in your homes, say playing meditative music in the background, that just helps refine the sense, the auditory sense that we all have. And that just creates a certain vibration. Similarly, like I talked about doing columns in the morning, or doing even flower mandalas in the morning, or even look at the walls in your house. Because, and this is another very minute little detail, that is from mother's writing. She always talks about, never keep your cupboards open. If you have shelves, keep them closed, because otherwise it's a visual noise. And whatever you're physically seeing with your eyes should always be beautiful. So use your walls for putting very beautiful meditative paintings. That is the true use of the walls, not to put one more shelf and, dump things on the top of it, not that. And as many shelves as you can, have them closed, go for closed shelves. In fact, she's so meticulous in the kind of guidance that the mother has given. She's even said that ideally the almirah should be a part of the wall. It should not protrude out of the wall, because that itself is a visual disharmony. The most harmonious way of doing things is like that. So these are small little ways through which you can begin with your own house. Like I said, a thorough cleaning, which is why we've always had this, this massive Diwali cleaning. But nowadays, this massive Diwali cleaning is also kind of taking a back seat. And what is now glorified for Diwali is the shopping of the new clothes, rather than the fact that Diwali actually used to be also the time where you discard old clothes, where you give away old clothes, where you clean up the house. I remember growing up during Diwali, each and every notebook, wherever any page which was unused, my mother would make me tear it off and we'd use it as a rough page later on. Now, all of that is just getting away from our culture. Diwali before shopping is a festival of cleaning, and only when in a clean space, in a beautiful space, can one invoke Lakshmi, Ma Lakshmi, which is the goddess of beauty, which is the goddess of abundance and delight. Only that abundance of beauty and that abundance that Ma Lakshmi really represents can come in life when things are clean and beautiful. And yes, of course, the way you do interior decor in your house, in your rooms, in your bathrooms, these are all avenues for you to bring in beauty. Even the way your toilet is kept. There's a particular statement by the mother that says that, you can tell about the person's mind by looking at the person's drawer. Yeah. And so it really is a sadhana onto itself. And I'll share another experience. In the beginning, I used to do agarbattis at different spaces of my house. And, a lot of my friends and relatives, they were like, why do you do it at different spaces of the house? This is something sacred. It should only be done, around the god. You shouldn't do agarbatti in different spaces of the house. But I said that for me, everything is meant for God, and this entire space is meant for God to come. And if the entire space is meant for God to come, then let Krishna breathe, beautiful fragrances anywhere in the house. And then also I also started, doing agarbattis in the washroom. Why not? It is also a sacred space, and it is a symbolic gesture of sanctifying even that area of your life. Isn't all life is yoga? And when all life is yoga, then all different aspects of life have to be beautiful, have to be sacred, have to be sanctified. So yes, that's another way of bringing beauty into life in a very practical way. Another, of course, is connecting with nature. There is nothing, in my perspective, that can surpass the beauty of a flower. There is nothing, we can try painting the flowers, we can try creating beautiful things. There is nothing that beats, in that sense, that can even compete or dare to compete with a flower that has just bloomed. So gardening and spending time in nature, these are very, very incredible means of integral education, because very subtly, very softly, your senses begin to get refined. And because flowers are in the vegetal kingdom representatives of the psychic, of the soul, it begins to make you also come closer to the soul or the inner being within. And then, of course, the second way, another way that we can bring in beauty in our everyday life is through how we do things, the way in which we do things. Simple things also, right? You can be rubbing, yourself after bathing. Now, the rub of the towel to your skin can be gentler, or can be very harsh, or it can be very mechanical. My mind is in that meeting. My body is taking bath. I am not taking bath. My mind is somewhere else, and I'm into that meeting, and fatafat, I just, rub it off, and I don't give that kind of an importance to that body, because, no Maya, and not to be paid regard and attention, but not like that. When we are talking about an integration with the physical world, with the material world, it's very, very important to pay attention to small little details of life. Even, in cooking, one can bring in that sense of beauty. One can even bring in that sense of beauty. And of course, before I come to the third one, one can really bring in the cooking part, and just in simple little things of how one presents food. That is an incredible territory for developing the aesthetic sense, of developing an experience and bringing beauty, and not just visual beauty. There's a beauty of taste also. And the more sensitive you will become, the more refined your senses will become, the more you can begin to sense, whether this thing is truly beautiful or not. So the next time, one of the things you ask yourself, we ask, is it tasty? Nowadays, we also ask, is it healthy? And ask yourself, is it beautiful? Is this thing beautiful? And beautiful in its taste, in its fragrance, in the way it looks. Is it beautiful? So bringing beauty through food is another way. And then, of course, beauty in speech. Even in simple, simple everyday life communication. Your everyday life communication can also be very beautiful. I remember now, as a community in Poonam, everybody sends flowers to each other. It has almost become a cultural norm. So we don't say, okay, fine. We say, we send a flower. It's just a small little gesture in which you could have done it with a thumbs up or an okay, which is a bit of a bland way of saying things. Instead, you send a flower, which is a more beautiful way of saying okay. So small little details of life in which one can bring in the aspect of beauty. And then, of course, the way you dress up, to ask yourself, what am I wearing? Is it the most truest representation of my inner being? Because even the clothing that you wear has to represent who you are at a deeper level. Of course, it is sometimes not possible to have each and every clothing that you have, and I'm not asking you to redo your entire wardrobe for that matter, but any new clothes that you buy from now onwards, ask yourself, is the color of it, is the design of it, is the texture of it really an expression of the most deepest part of who I am? Or is it representing only something which is at a surface, a reality or a truth at a surface level? Or is it representing a certain desire or a certain passion fad? What is it really representing? What space is it coming from? Even what I wear, does it bring a sense of sacred beauty? Does it bring a sense of inner calm, quietude? What does it invoke? To ask oneself these questions. And then, of course, beauty, like I said, is love in the most physical form, and the most, in that sense, the deeper way of bringing beauty is to bring love in the heart. The more bhakti in the heart, the more devotion in the heart, the more love in the heart, the more pure feelings in the heart, more naturally beauty begins to flow out through you, as you. Even when, tomorrow you make an Excel sheet in a corporate, it'll be beautiful because the feeling that, you're putting into that Excel sheet is beautiful. And when you put in a beautiful feeling into anything, by itself, it begins to become beautiful. So love and the path of love is the absolute foundation on the path of beauty. With that, I come to a closure. We can move to questions and answers now. There are a few questions that have come on chat. Aditi, how would you like to proceed? Shall I take the questions on chat?
Just we'll hear from Dr. Bichlani and then we'll move to the questions. So.
Thank you, Divyanshi. You look good. and you have a beautiful mind. Both Divyanshi and Aditi and many more, I have two examples here. Among the youngest of the seekers, and Aditi, of course, is the youngest on RS team now. They remind me of Sri Aurobindo's lines in Savitri, the sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn, the barrier breakers of the world. These are the harbingers of the new creation that Sri Aurobindo and the mother have talked about. I might say a few more things towards the end, but I think let's first take up the questions which the audience has.
Sure. Divyanshi, would you like to read out, or should I read out for you?
So there's one which has been personally sent to me by Aryan. Aryan would like to see you if you are around. If you can switch on your camera, that will be helpful. So he's asking, in the pursuit of happiness, kindly explain how happiness goes away from us. That's a very, very good question. I mentioned it in passing, and good you caught onto that. See, the thing is, who pursues happiness? The person who's unhappy pursues happiness, right? So it's the ego which is pursuing happiness, and it is pursuing happiness for oneself. Now, the thing is, happiness is not a goal to be pursued. It is rather the state from which our actions must arise. So happiness is not an end point, it's a starting point. And the reason why it's a starting point is because, my dear, our souls are made of delight. The very tattva, the very substance of which we are made of is delight, is joy. And one of the questions that often when we get into this existential crisis that we ask, what is the purpose of life? Why did the divine create all of this? And it is answered very, very beautifully. And I can't quote Sri Aurobindo verbatim, but in one of his poems, he quotes it very, very beautifully. It is for the joy of creation that the Creator has created the creation, right? So if it is delight which is at the very heart or the soul of existence, then how do you pursue happiness? Happiness is who you are. You don't pursue it. It is who you are in your very sense, in your very tattva, in your very, very core. So one must begin with originating one's thoughts, feelings, actions, impulses from that space of delight, by opening oneself to that space of delight rather than pursue happiness. And also in the pursuit of happiness, one gets into this myth. If I have a good relationship, I will be happy. If I get a good flat, I will be happy. If I get a good job, I will be happy. And nowadays, there are so many of these TED Talks. There are so many people who will tell you now, even research is telling you, by getting things, after a certain point in time, it doesn't contribute towards your happiness. In fact, it makes you even more miserly and unhappy. I remember one of the experiences of going to this very little village, near Kanpur, hardly had electricity. It didn't have water, but it had people who were just so full of joy and delight. So in that sense, it's not things that can give you happiness. It is a state of being, and it's a choice. It's a choice moment to moment. It is irrespective of your circumstance. It's a choice you make, whether am I coming from a space of joy, whether am I entering into life from a space of delight, or I choose not to do it. And in terms of, how happiness goes away when you pursue it, how delight goes away when you pursue it, it's like, it's the narrow sense of the ego that is wanting to grab hold of something for its own sake, for its own fulfillment, right? And that's usually the case with anything which is divine. When you pursue even, the divine siddhis, any of the divine qualities or siddhis, when you pursue it for your own sake, the more you will try to pursue them, the more they will go away. And that's the same thing with anything, even for that matter with money also. You must have noticed for yourself, the more money you want, the more miserly you become, and the more sense of scarcity you have, and the farther it kind of goes away from you, because the very law of life is the law of sacrifice. This is also one of the fundamental things that Rig Veda talks about, which our Vedas also talk about. It is in the image of that to whom which we give, we become. So the very fundamental part of yoga, the very fundamental aspect of life is to give oneself. We've taken birth on this earth, which is full of ignorance, which is full of struggle. We've taken birth on this earth because our souls have a purpose to fulfill in life. We are meant to, we've come here for a certain reason. And if we don't give ourselves to that higher purpose, to that higher force, then, we are just whiling away our time. We are wasting our time. We are wasting this lifetime. And the courage that our soul showed to come down here upon earth. Because, earth is the battlefield where all the forces are getting churned. So the soul showed a lot of courage to come and plunge itself into this landscape of struggle and ignorance, and it took that plunge for a certain purpose, right? And if we don't give ourselves to that purpose, if we don't give ourselves to something higher, then we are wasting our life. So one of the fundamental pursuits of yoga, one of the very fundamental things in yoga is to shift from doing things for what I will get to what I can give. And when you begin to give, there's a particular line in one of the Orwell's 3 major documents that when you begin to give, when you begin to be aligned, when you begin to be a willing servitor of the divine consciousness, then whatever work, resources, money that is required for you begins to come. But you don't pursue after them. You don't negotiate with the divine. It's not a negotiatory deal with the divine. It's a pure joy of giving for the love of giving for the sake of giving. And it is in giving that true joy and true progress is. And anyone who's done any kind of a seva knows this joy that I'm talking about. It's like you receive much more joy when you've given something. You've added something valuable in somebody's life. You've given something meaningful than when, you receive a gift, right? When you give something, that is when, you really feel useful. You really feel, like you're coming alive. So this self-giving is a very fundamental aspect of life. And when one begins to get this principle, one begins to joyfully progress on the path. Otherwise, what tends to happen is giving is often a negotiation. It's a bargain. That bargain we are sometimes doing with an employer, sometimes we are doing with our husband, sometimes, we are doing with somebody else. It's always a negotiation that, we are participating in. And when one lets go of that sense of negotiation and one just wholeheartedly, with all one's being, sweat and love, gives oneself, one naturally progresses, and naturally, one opens to the force or the secret of delight and joy from within. Not about beauty, but I really liked your question, so I've sort of taken it. Instead of directly messaging, can you be writing it to the entire group? That will also help. There's one more thing over chat that I will read out. Perhaps it has been privately sent to me because you didn't want it to be public, so I'll not name. You're almost answering my question I have within, but one small thing I'm struggling is when I have to deal with 3-year-old anger, 3 years old anger or shouting, I feel I'm reacting very badly and I feel bad after that. I feel bad afterwards, but still don't know how to change that within me. I'm assuming the 3 years old is a child, is a baby, right? Yes, when you have to deal with the anger of a little child. So my experience with children is very limited, very honestly. I deal with adults, and I'm probably not the best person to be answering this question. But generically, probably whatever I can respond, I will try my best to respond to that, which is the thing with children, is they are pure psychic and pure vital. You really see the pure, the sparkle of a flower in the child's eyes. And at the same time, you see the pure animal in them. Whereas adults, keep the animal chained and they can manipulate and all of it. But the children are pure animals and pure flowers at the same time, right? And here is where the principle comes in of attention. Wherever you put in the attention, that is where the energy goes. So particularly when dealing with the child, of course, it's difficult when particularly you see the rawness of the animal come out. It becomes very, very difficult. But you keep your focus on the flower part of the child, on the psychic part of the child, on the swan part of the child, right? And another, so one is the aspect of attention, where you are responding to that which is psychic in the child, that which is coming from that deeper sense in the child. And another is, especially little children, if they're getting angry, it is also a certain indication that their physical energy is not getting out in a certain constructive way. So a lot of, if you look at, say, the ashram school, a lot of focus has been given to sports, even for little children. So really like a rigorous physical education, a physical workout, physically getting engaged in any kind of a sport from the beginning is an important aspect. And unfortunately, our schools only value academics or give a lot of precedence to academics and exams and getting marks. But this aspect of sports and physical education is of utmost importance, particularly in the brahmacharya period, particularly in the growing up years. For that energy, even during as teenagers, it's very, very important. Otherwise, often that energy and that sexual energy also doesn't find the right expression. So it's extremely important in the growing up years to have a solid bodily foundation. The aspect of physical is very, very important. And that's another thing that comes to my mind. You're asking me all kinds of questions and you're asking me all privately and nothing to do with beauty, but I'm okay. I'm in 8th grade right now and I'm not able to focus on my studies and not able to be happy. I'm not that curious as I was earlier in class 5th, 6th and 7th. You can take my email ID and write to me in a bit detail about it. I wouldn't be able to respond to this right now because I really need to know as to what has changed from 5th, 6th and 7th to now to be able to answer. So I can't just arbitrarily give an answer there. Okay, any other questions? Anybody would like to unmute and ask the question? That is also another perspective that Navneet ji is bringing in, though I'm not too sure how one would apply that in the context of children. That's why I did not bring it up. But this is another particular thing that Mother has always said, that if an impurity in the other person is disturbing you, it basically means in some form or the other that impurity exists within you. So it's called the mirror principle. It may feel very shocking sometimes because when we are angry, we feel the other person has wronged me, the other person, we see the fault of the other person. We don't really see how am I creating or recreating this reality. So either there is somewhere within you a hook, which is, recreating that situation again and again, which is recreating that anger again and again, or, it represents something in you itself, which the other person is just mirroring. It's like life trying to show you what you need to work in yourself. So that is another perspective that can help bring a lot of humility. Kashvi, would you like to unmute and share?
So, ma'am, my question was that, like, you talked about beauty. So, can we make something like out of beauty, something online?
Something online. So first of all, to begin with, let us take our mobiles. Most of the people use mobiles. And to what I've seen in people around me, the mobile screens are pretty messed up with icons. Can we keep the icons in a bit orderly way? This is something online, even say WhatsApp, some messages we've responded to, some messages we haven't responded to, everything is all over the place. WhatsApp gives you also this beautiful opportunity to put a display picture, on groups. So instead of things being chaotic, even in an electronic space, can we bring in a certain sense of orderliness within that electronic space? If there are chats that, you're not responsive in, why don't you archive that? The desktop of your laptop, does it have to have all kinds of folders floating everywhere and a lack of organization? Can we bring in beauty in that space? And in fact, so many times during a day these days, we have this habit, doing this and doing this, right? This. I was seeing a little child also, he was trying to open the toilet door like this. So we have this habit of doing like this. No? So since we've been doing like this so many times in the day, why don't we put something beautiful here? Every time you see your screensaver, every time you see your wallpaper, at least it reminds you of the divine. You're not seeing the icons floating everywhere. Similarly, your desktop picture, your screensaver, why can't it be full of beauty? Right? So bring in order, organization, decluttering, the way, your Google Drive, for instance, is organized, or your inboxes. Our inboxes are flooded with thousands and thousands of email. Why is it so? Why can't we keep our inboxes clean? Now, beauty can come in any different dimension of your life. All life is yoga. Right? So even in the electronic spaces, in the way you're keeping your inbox, in the way you're keeping your Google Drive, in the way, you're keeping your desktop, one can bring in beauty in those aspects of life. Definitely. Even in an online space, one can bring in a lot of beauty. Okay. Any other? Yes.
One question I had, Divyanshi, about this. You mentioned about meditative music. So, could you give some examples or
I have
some
a
sources?
playlist, actually. I can give the entire playlist to Aditi, and or I can give an entire playlist to you as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But also it's important for oneself to be able to at least begin to pay attention to these things. Just by attention, the knowledge will come. Just asking yourself, what does this music represent? Whether, usually our association with beauty is that of like or dislike. I like the song, I don't like the song. Doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It's not about your liking or disliking. It's about, what does this music represent? What is the consciousness behind this movie? What is the consciousness behind this art piece? So you begin to develop a certain fineness and a certain a refinement of, so then this music has a psychic touch. This music does not have a psychic touch. And these things can only be learned through paying attention in detail and tuning into the vibration behind these things, because we cannot give a blanket rule. Because I've seen, for instance, Indian classical dancers that are very vital, and I've seen belly dancers that are very, coming from a deeper space. So usually, obviously speaking, that, belly dancers are bent towards sensuality, and Indian classical dance have a bent towards, have an opening towards the higher force and the divinity and the sacred beauty. But it is also not so simple as that, one to be able to see the vibration and the consciousness behind each thing. And that is where one begins to tune in and see. Yes, Rede.
Yes, namaste. Awesome talk. just wanted to ask you, when you were speaking about the colors and not having a contrast colors, does that make a painting more higher quality if we don't use the contrast colors? Does Maza has anything to say on that?
You have to try it out to see what Mother has to say. She has talked about this thing more than darker colors and contrast, which is a physical way of representing light and darkness. She's spoken about that often in art. Yes, we do use that sense of contrast between light and darkness to bring beauty. And one of the instructions that Mother was constantly giving to Huta, who painted under Mother's guidance, is to use light to bring out light. And in some of Huta's paintings, you see that, because some of Huta's paintings are very light. It is not using any of those darker shades and colors. It has that whitish, gold, sky blue, very light golden yellow. And it doesn't have any dark colors. And yet it is very, very beautiful, which purely from an artistic perspective is something way more difficult to do. It's much easier. Let's say, if I paint everything black and in that I put white, all your attention will go to that white because it's visually very, very visible. But certainly a higher sense of beauty is possible to create beyond that play of light and darkness. And this need not necessarily always mean a physical contrast. What I think it means is a more at a deeper level, the contrast between light and darkness. And that in a subtler sense applies in our own life. To give you an example, I meet with an accident, right? And so many people come and help me, take me to the hospital, and I feel, oh my God, so good. People are so helpful. They help me so much. And God, by God's grace, I've been saved. So whenever we are taken out of darkness, we see the light, the light at the end of the tunnel, we appreciate it. But when there is no darkness, there is 100 times more grace at play. So the very fact that I'm going from my home to my work and I did not meet with an accident is a much more work of grace, is a much better example of light and divine grace in the world. But I will not appreciate that. I will appreciate when I meet with a certain accident and then humanity comes and helps me. But the very fact that I did not meet with an accident means that so many factors in the universe have gone just right for me to reach from one place to the others. So many people who put in their effort at making the road. So many, trees are just doing fine for me to go from one place to the other. That the vehicle is functioning fine. My vehicle is not breaking away. It means that there is a hand of nature at work, which is making sure everything is right. So it's a tendency of the human nature to be able to see light in the context of darkness, and often not to appreciate light when nothing is going wrong. In that context, it's so much more difficult to be like, yes, there is divine light. Yes, there is beauty. So I guess it is in that context that Mother meant more. It was less of that physical contrast, but yes, in a physical contrast also it holds true, but more at a deeper level also. This aspect of being able to bring it. It's like, most people write poetry when after a breakup. That's the most ideal time, to write poetry. Why does one have to go through difficulties to open to the Saraswati, to the inspiration, and allow that word to flow? Nothing is going wrong, and I can be like, wow, I can still write poetry, which is why Sartre is supramental poetry, because it is coming from light and going towards light. It is beyond our usual way of producing art. Usually we become more rhythmic and poetic and artists when we go through darkness, and through that we realize the value of light. But to be able to receive light when nothing is going wrong is so much more difficult. To go from light to light on the sunlit path. So we have Senthil, who's raised his hand. I think that can be the last question, and then over to Dr. Vishnu.
Yes, you are telling beauty in terms of speech and in terms of eyes and all. We can able to balance it. Beauty in terms of the smell it comes, you cannot able to balance the beauty. Suddenly,
In
if the
terms of
smell
what? I'm
comes,
sorry, I didn't understand. In terms of what?
in terms of smell, the
Smell.
fragrance or smell.
Yes. Yes. In
So
terms
if the smell comes, so we reject it immediately. We cannot be able to accept or balance this thing. Whereas in terms of speech, somebody their speech in a different way is not beautiful. We can able to balance it through eyes. If they see, we can able to balance it. Whereas in terms of smell, we could not be able to balance it. We have to reject and we move away from the space. So I would like to hear from you how to balance this particular yogic perspective.
That's an excellent question. And I think by balance, you mean how to remain equanimous in the context of encountering, say, a bad smell. Just like, one is able to still be equanimous in the context of a bad visual. So how does one do that? First of all, I can just begin with saying that the very fact that you observe this, it's a very, very keen observation that he's made. The very fact that you observed it, it gives a lot of importance to the sense of smell. So before I answer your question, I just want to bring in the amount of importance to be given to the sense of smell. Actually, there is, I remember in my college days, one of my teachers speaking, which is the one sense which is most associated with memory. And she asked all of us to guess. And most of us wrote visual, it's the eye. Some of us wrote auditory, it is the ear. But then she said it is smell which is most associated with memory. It is because smell creates a very subtle and deep impact, which is also one of the things that you will see a fragrance in almost all kinds of temples, and not just temples, all kinds of spiritual places. If you see, will always have fragrance, will always have some or the other form of agarbatti. So it's a very, very potent sense that is there. Now coming, so because it is a very, very potent sense which is there, actually we are not utilizing this sense a lot. If you see, eyes are overutilized a bit because you're constantly, advertisements are also coming at us, constantly seeing things, and especially now with computer, constantly looking. Eyes in that sense is a bit of an overused sense. But smell as a sense, we're actually not utilizing. And we can, very easily begin to utilize this one sense by just lighting an agarbatti every morning. It is so simple. And the thing is, each sense is both an outer sense as well as an inner sense. So the more finely you will begin to cultivate your sense of smell, you will also begin to sense, this is the smell of this thought. This is the smell of this room, which is not a physical smell. It is an energetic smell. It is a vibrational smell. So to be able to truly smell. Now, in terms of physical smell and not being able to bear it, it is all the more motivation, first of all, for you to really have clean surroundings. Even before I go to the aspect of we must develop equanimity with respect to, poor smelling places, I would, go for clean spaces that do not smell, that have a beautiful smell, and working towards that. And then, if you want to develop equanimity towards something, then the best method is to kind of have, an exposure to it and go slow, and slowly you begin to neutralize that charge. This is in case you want to develop, an affinity towards that. And also, to begin to see that, for us, for instance, what we consider as bad smell, right? Say, the excreta or the vegetable and all of that comes, there is a difference there. There is a difference between, see, if you're eating good food, Even the excreta that will come out of your body will not be that smelly. It's a part of refining each part of your life, each part of your senses, right? The truly gross and bad smells, they also represent a certain disharmony in the system. Even if you look at, say, the vegetable waste, if it's good vegetables, and if it is not, you've not put it for rotting, right? Then actually there is a certain sugandh, there is a certain beautiful smell even to the compost that is getting formed. So first, in the very first place, not to truly generate the most crudest kind of smells as humanity. And second, if that is a situation that comes, then the being anchored in the inner being is the only solution towards developing equanimity. But equanimity, not the kind of equanimity that doesn't allow you to, that makes you indifferent. It should, move you towards action to create beautiful divine earth. Okay, on that note, I am going to hand it over to Aditi and Dr. Vijlan.
I may start with that question, which I interpreted a little differently, that 3-year-old anger. I'm glad that you interpreted it the way you did, because that brought out an important aspect of how anger can be dealt with when it is the anger of a 3-year-old child. But the way I interpreted it was that anger that has lasted 3 years. Something happened 3 years ago and the anger refuses to go away. Obviously, it is directed at some person. And there's only one way to get that anger out of your system, and that is genuine forgiveness. Forgive that person genuinely. And genuine forgiveness is not just a mental decision that I have forgiven. It goes deeper to the psychic being, because it is at that level that one develops a more charitable view of the person who has hurt you, see that person as a manifestation of the divine, and forgive that person genuinely. It should be neither a mental decision nor even, what can happen is an egoistic decision that I am superior to him because I have forgiven him, or a condescending attitude, well, he is not worth getting angry about, so you're looking down at him. Now, these are also attitudes which can be mixed up with forgiveness, but that is not genuine forgiveness. The second thing I thought I'll touch upon is the cleanliness that you emphasize so much, and that in fact was a good reminder even to me of to make my surroundings cleaner. But then reminded me of one thing, beautiful thing that the mother has said about even the process of cleaning up being made as beautiful as possible. And with that, she has given an example of the Japanese, who even when they are dealing with garbage, they collect that garbage in such a way that it starts looking like a sculpture. So how you arrange the garbage can also have a sense of beauty about it. And the last thing that I thought I'll do is the connection between beauty and happiness. These are two things that all of us pursue, and they continue to defy us for similar reasons. And the first reason is that we try and look at both these things in terms of certain mental constructs, some objective criteria of what constitutes physical beauty and what is it that can bring me happiness in terms of concrete things like the bank balance, the type of job I do, all the things that you talked about, the type of relationships I have. So we have a certain set of objective criteria by which we tend to define both. The second important reason, which is perhaps even more important, why these both beauty and happiness continue to defy us, is because we are thinking of them as something that I want to get. I want to look beautiful, I want to be happy, and the interesting fact is that my happiness and my sense of beauty cannot be divorced from the beauty around me and the happiness around me. And if I do anything by which I can create happiness for people around me, create a beautiful environment for people around me, my happiness will follow automatically as a byproduct. I have to pursue neither happiness nor beauty. Thank you. With that, I'll speak to Aditi, who also. You have the last word.
I just have a lot of gratitude to offer to Divyanshi for spending time and sharing about beauty. And thank you everyone for being here. And we end with the meditative music. And thank you once again.